Hello to everybody out there in our Montasy Comics Extended Universe. We are back with another Montasy Presents Frequently Asked. I'm Adam, and this is
Jimmy here. And what is today's topic?
Oh, we're going to be talking about specifically trading card games and the many ways to play, formats, as they're usually called. You might say, hey, there's a card game I'm interested in picking up, but there are so many different types of rules and different versions of the game, I'm at a loss as to where to start.
That's true. That's definitely a question that a lot of people come in. They say, I think a few episodes ago we talked about, I want to get into Magic, I want to get into Pokemon, I want to get into Yu-Gi-Oh, how do I get started? And then after you started buying some decks, you started going, people talk about all these formats. What do they mean? And all that and so forth. So we thought that is something that we often would speak to different customers about in terms of what are the Magic formats, what are the Pokemon formats, and what are the Yu-Gi-Oh formats, amongst other TCGs. But I think these three have been around for a bit, and therefore there's a bit more of variety of formats that they've developed or people have started creating. And I'll let Adam get started on what is the most popular and useful format that people usually use.
So if we start with Magic, Magic has been around for almost 30 years. It's the oldest trading card game in existence. Before Magic, there was no such thing as a TCG. Trading card games began with Magic. That is a lot of cards. That is almost 30 years worth of cards. That is longer than the entire lifetime of many people who are currently playing the game. So as a result, it's important for...
Chris raised his hand and say, yep, okay. Older than me.
Hey, older than me too.
Is it? Oh, sorry.
No, actually, I think Magic is actually, because it's not 30 yet, Magic is actually, I think, a year behind me.
So just younger sibling?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am a big brother to Magic. But there are a lot of different ways to play because there have been so many releases as far as cards go. You don't want to be in a situation where the best card was printed in 1993, so if you can't get a card from 1993 that hasn't been printed since then, you can't play the game, or you don't have the same cards that your opponent has. That's why they break things down into what they call formats. Standard format being the most central one. Standard, I was going to grab something here. That was just a deck that recently came out. Standard is a format. All it means is that it only has cards that were released in up to the past 2 years. That's going to change every so often. Whenever a new set comes out, it's added to the sets that are legal for Standard, but then every year it refreshes. So once we hit 2 years, the things from 2 years ago phase out. So every year it's what they call a rotation. So that means that if you're starting out now, you could buy a deck and play it right out of the box, but if you're thinking, I want to start adding to my deck, I want to customize, I want to start building things, those cards are going to be accessible, those cards are going to be available because they all came out at most 2 years ago.
Yeah, and it's pretty simple because you could just pretty much follow the sets, right? When a certain time period hits, X, Y, Z sets then automatically rotates out, as Adam talked about earlier, and it keeps everything fresh, right? Just imagine if you are playing reprints of the same card for the last 30 years, which is could be really powerful cards, but you aren't able to add a lot of things into it. So imagine using some of the old cards that are just so powerful that the new cards really can't even compete.
Yeah, I think they call that power creep. Gaming terms where you don't want to be in a situation often where you have to create more powerful cards in order to have them be playable with the older cards, such that every single set has to have cards that were more powerful than the last, causing older things to become obsolete. This way, it becomes a cycle. Now, there is a downside to that. There's a drawback. If you think of it as that, for all of the benefits, the unfortunate thing is, because things rotate, cards that you get to play in Standard are not going to be playable in Standard forever. There might be something that's very good, that's very competitive, that it's the best card in your deck, or maybe it's just the most fun card in your deck and you love playing with it. After a year, after 2 years, if you want to play in Standard, that card is not going to be legal anymore.
Now, is that something that we want to go into also with respect to Pokemon? in terms of what Pokemon Standard represents? Are there any similarities and differences? The short answer is, I'm just jumping in. The short answer is no. In terms of Pokemon is still also 2 years in terms of the standard.
Yeah.
But the only difference is really Pokemon is based on period of time. So you could have a product that releases, but then a few months later, certain sets goes out. Whereas for Magic, it's literally, hey, once this set comes out, this group of cards are out of there. But in general, when you're talking about Pokemon and Magic Standard, they're pretty much the same.
Yep. But then let's say that you have those cards and you want to continue playing. You want to not say, oh, these cards are retired and I'm never going to look at them again. I still want to be able to use them and play them and have fun with them. That's where other formats come in. These older formats are what we would call non-rotating formats, meaning once something is playable in it, it's always going to be playable. It's not going to reach a certain date. It has no expiration date, essentially. And there are different non-rotating formats based on how far back they go. So if we're looking at something relatively recent, you might have a format like Pioneer. That's all things from roughly the past 10 years or so of Magic. That's something where if you started playing within that period, any of the cards that you got are still going to be usable, but you also don't have to go back 20 years, 30 years in order to start getting cards that have been out of print for a super long time.
Exactly. And something like this, just imagine when you were playing, let's say 5, 6 years ago or 7 years ago, there are certain cards that you love to play. Now, Pioneer allows you to go, hey, I remember this card. Let me now try to construct a deck based on this period of time.
And for Magic, there are different formats that do similar things. It's just a difference in time period. So if someone says, oh, Pioneer versus Modern versus Legacy, these all just have a different starting point. So Modern might go back an additional 10 years. Legacy goes back all the way to the very beginning. But what it means is that all of these formats are going to have a particular start point, but the end point is always going to be the present. Things get added in, but nothing gets taken out. That is the main structure for our usual typical formats, things that are constructed formats where you build a deck. But there are other ways to play, right?
I think so.
So I think we've talked in the past in some of our other videos, and this is a thing that continues to be very popular, about limited formats. So something where you want to not play with a deck that you built that you're bringing into a tournament, but you might build as part of an event. You might build, let's say if you're going to a competitive tournament, or something as simple and straightforward as a pre-release. If we're talking about something like that, that would be sealed. Is probably the most simple format of that, but it's the most simple way to do that. Building a deck out of packs that you've just opened in front of you. That's going to vary based on whether we're looking at something where you're just looking at 6 packs, or you're looking at maybe a pre-release kit like this. We could see a lot of games, Magic included, do a special configuration specifically for some of these events. So for example, you'll get in a pre-release kit when you're going for a new set that's releasing, 6 packs, but you might also get a promo card that is playable within that deck only for that event. Or you might have, if there's a particular theme to that set, you might have particular packs as well that tie into that and make your deck lean in a particular direction one way or another. For Magic, they typically fall onto the 6-pack foundation with a couple of extra things here and there.
Yeah, and that's also an extension of what you referred to earlier as sealed, right? Sealed format. You get 6 packs, you effectively open them, you build a deck, and you have fun with it. And also, when you're looking at it from a pre-release standpoint, whether it's Magic or Pokemon, this is often a great entryway into a casual play. Sometimes when folks are interested in playing any particular game, there's a little bit of fear factor of going into a quote-unquote tournament, right? We have pre-releases, but pre-release is a perfect way for you who's interested to come in, look at the new cards and the cool cards, and then from there, build the deck. And I think that's seal format, and especially in pre-release, you don't have as much of a pressure to say, oh, we're competing for something. because especially when Pokemon, they specifically want folks to get prizes regardless of whether or not they win or lose. It's just really seeing what the new cards are about and getting learned to play and playing against each other. Now, while that doesn't necessarily even out the playing field in terms of a beginner versus somebody who's been playing for a while, it does allow people to look at the cards, most of the cards often, for the very first time, and then construct a deck for the first time. So pre-release is something that I personally recommend for anybody who's relatively new or somebody who's getting back into the game to join and build decks from there.
Yeah, and Magic, we've talked about a lot of different ways that constructed formats will limit the period of what's playable and what's not. Pokemon, as we mentioned, does something similar. Let's say I wanted to start playing Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yes.
If I were someone who says, hey, I want to start playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm going to maybe pick up a deck, maybe try to build something, but I want to know what different types of play there are. How does Yu-Gi-Oh! Break that down?
Well, there's a couple ways of doing it. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has come out with what's called the intro deck. The intro deck is very basic. It's very similar to what Pokemon does with a theme deck. You could just pretty much buy one of these, open it, and start playing it. Now, it's similar to what I've spoken to a lot of folks, which is you're not going to necessarily win a tournament, and we talked about this in previous episode, but it's something that gets your feet wet. You get a sense of what it is. However, even from a Yu-Gi-Oh! Standpoint, what we also tell people, if you want to have a slightly more powerful deck, they often will buy structure decks, combine them, and put together a deck. Now, the thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! That's different than Magic and Pokemon is that they don't necessarily say, oh, after a couple years or after a period to determine how long certain decks are playable or certain cards are playable. What they're able to utilize is what's called a ban list. So let's say, for example, if a very powerful or popular card is being used for the last, let's say, 2 years, and there's a new set coming out, people started looking at what's called ban lists. Some of the really powerful cards could be banned, so that it'll automatically rotate into this new set, new theme that people can play and construct a deck from. So I often tell people that when you are playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, a way to figure out when the deck is popular or when you're looking at new sets and all that and so forth, the format oftentimes is determined by the ban list. And it's broken out pretty much into 2 basic formats. One I like to remember, it's called Advanced, and another one I think it's called Traditional. Advanced is really what I was talking about, is dictated by the ban list, while Traditional is they limit the cards, but it's what I would consider, and Adam had referred to, like the vintage format-ish from Magic, or what is the old legacy format for both Pokemon and Magic. It means that it allows you to play some of the older cards that you had and have fun, but the challenge is when it's older cards in there aren't as many changes in terms of decks that you're playing. So that's pretty much Yu-Gi-Oh!
Mm-hmm. So essentially Yu-Gi-Oh!, if I'm understanding this right, as someone who played back in the day but hasn't picked up a competitive deck in a while, or hasn't looked at the competitiveness of the format in a while, for Yu-Gi-Oh! It's not based on what set the card is from, but it's specific cards that get either taken in or taken out.
Exactly.
As the game
exactly.
goes.
And for players who's been playing for a while, they usually could guess approximately when there's going to be a ban list coming out, associated with the new sets and all that and so forth, so they would adjust accordingly.
But the cards can also, the fact that a card has been banned doesn't mean it's always going to be banned forever, right?
Oh yeah, they've definitely unbanned or make a card what's called limited, meaning that instead of the traditional 3x type of same card, now it's maybe 1 could be used or 2 could be used. So now, keep in mind, I mean, there are a whole bunch of other formats that the trading card games that people play that's not necessarily supported by tournaments, people have a lot of fun with. And that's what TCG is about. Like, you create different ways. And I think, Adam, you alluded to earlier, what is the most popular format?
Oh, I mean, we were talking before, they say the most popular format for Magic, or really any card game, is kitchen table. It's sitting down with your friends and playing based on rules and parameters that speak to you. That's something that I think is really important to remember. Trading card games have they have these restrictions and they have limitations, really for the sake of keeping organized play fresh, keeping the game open. But most people are going to be playing with the cards that they have. And as long as you and your friends can agree on something, and as long as that is fun for you, none of these are essential components of playing the game. If you're sitting down with a group of people, it doesn't necessarily matter if I have a card that's from 3 years ago. It's not legal in a standard deck, but you know what? We're all just playing with cards from the past 3 years because that's when we started playing, and we're happy with that.
Yeah, and what's great about it is it allows the creativity of each individual, right? I mean, with all these cards, one thing that personally that I love about it is you could pick up a card and go, you know what? Maybe I could build a deck around it. It'd be kind of cool, just to see, right? And I would say one format that kind of rose out of what I would consider pseudo kitchen table is Commander.
That's actually a really interesting thing about Commander, which is right now, just in terms of the number of people who play and how engaged those folks are, is really one of the dominant formats of Magic.
It's considered a kitchen table format, right?
Yeah, but that's the thing. Technically, Commander is not a format in the same way that something like Standard or Pioneer or Modern is. Commander is something that was created essentially as a casual format. It has really different rules from other formats. It's got multiple players who play at once. Decks are huge. There are special cards that play a special role. Your Commander card that you wouldn't see in any other format. It really is kind of a casual experiment pushing the limits of how Magic is played, or at least it started as that.
Yep.
However, that is something that has become so popular that now we're seeing every couple of months new products that are designed specifically for that format. Essentially, this one casual way of playing not only got the official blessings of Wizards of the Coast, who publishes Magic, but actually became something that now the sets themselves and the new cards themselves are designed to accommodate.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, this format is created by the masses.
Yeah, I mean, Commander, this is actually the really interesting thing. It has its own rules committee. Mm-hmm. It is not actually governed by Wizards of the Coast the same way that other formats are. So it still, even as all of these products are made for it, remains a semi-independent, semi-casual format compared to these other ones that were created specifically for the sake of competitive or tournament play.
Yeah, and for many of you who might be into Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh, don't know if that's doable for the same concept, but that then is what's the fun part of TCG, right? You create your own decks, you create your own format sometimes, just for fun. Now, we've definitely touched upon some aspects, and we didn't really go through a deep dive of the different types of formats, but this oftentimes are a good way to get started on, I would say. And often that's what we're able to explain to various folks that comes in and ask about, hey, what are the formats? What do I do? How do I get started? What's the best way to get into a particular format? Mm-hmm. Right? But I'm sure there are a lot of other formats within Magic, maybe Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, as well as other TCGs that we haven't touched upon. But this is definitely what we generally would host in terms of events.
And there are always new things coming up. There's always possibilities for new additions to this, so nothing that we're talking about is static.
Yep.
Right? This is the state of things as they are, and this is a foundation, but you never know when the next Commander is going to come around, and maybe the unique way that you decide when you pick up your cards to start playing with, who knows, that could become the next Commander.
Exactly. Now, this one thing, that pretty much concludes our episode. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to say that you've seen a couple of our episodes. If there are any questions that you want us to try to address or try to answer, feel free to shoot us an email. Mm-hmm. It's info@montasycomicsnyc.com. Yeah.
And who knows, if you have your own ways of playing or favorite formats that we haven't talked about, maybe you could always comment and let us know about what speaks to you. I think that's been a pretty thorough rundown of the stuff that we were looking at today, but again, there's always more on the horizon, and there's always more for us on the horizon.
Exactly.
So I guess we will be seeing you next time.